Hi everyone, today I'm going to be making the truffles on page 464 of Cookwise, and I've got large grade A eggs, great value salted butter, great value heavy whipping cream, Grand Marnier, which is an orange liqueur, Ghirardelli semi-sweet chocolate baking bars, and Hershey's milk chocolate. This recipe calls for 10 to 11 ounces of the semi-sweet chocolate, so I've tared this measuring cup. There's 8 ounces. We'll call that good. And now I need 6 ounces of the milk chocolate. There we go. I've had this water on low heat just to get an idea of what kind of temperature it gets up to. Right now we got 132, 33, 34, so it's in the 130 range. I just wanted to have an idea because sometimes the settings can be a little ambiguous. I'm adding my 5 egg yolks and 1/4 cup of heavy cream to my skillet, and I'm using a coated skillet, which is not usually preferred in candy making, but truffles don't have to get as hot as a lot of other candies do. If you're going to make a candy that's supposed to get to, say, the hard ball stage or even a crackling stage, that heat can be so extreme that it damages the coating of the pan. But in this case, we don't need it that hot. So I'm mixing this away from the heat just to make sure it's thoroughly mixed before it starts heating. And I've got my stove on low. Also, I'm using a silicone spatula, and you don't want to use utensils like that are metal and conduct heat, because that draws heat away from your candy mixture and can cause premature crystallization. So that's why I'm going to be using this spatula throughout. And we're just looking for this to thicken slightly. We don't want the eggs to scramble. I tried my best to get all the strings of white, the collage that hold the yolk in place. It looks like there's still a little bit of it. Shouldn't hurt it. Been stirring for about 4 minutes, and the temperature of this egg mixture is about 118, 120. I'm kind of having a hard time seeing if it has thickened so far. It smells very buttery. Doesn't seem like the eggs are cooking, so that's good. After 6 minutes, I'm going to call this good. There's some film on top that makes it look like it's cooking a little, and the edges, you can see how they're kind of jagged and mounded over. That signifies to me at least that it's more thick. So I'm going to add 4 tablespoons of butter. And stir this in, and then once that's pretty melted, I'm going to stir in my chocolate. So here I've got some chocolate melting in there. I'm adding it kind of slowly. And I didn't have a food processor at my disposal today, so I just broke up some of the chips as well as I could and used a blender for a little bit. Also, in this recipe, I forgot to mention at the beginning that the experiment that I'm actually doing is I am adding the liqueur to one and not the other. And that's, I mean, there's also some chemistry going on there, but one of the main factors that comes into play there is the amount of liquid. And Courier says in the intro to this recipe that it was right on the line of having enough liquid. I think a tablespoon per 2 ounces of chocolate in this recipe is right on that line. And so if I take out the 4th cup of alcohol in the recipe, I predict that it could lead to some seizing of the chocolate. With this, here we're not using it for a coating or anything, but it may still be apparent that the chocolate will seize up. And you can see that by, it looks kind of dry and crackly and doesn't really, it's not creamy anymore. It's kind of cakey. So we'll see if that happens with the recipe that I omit a 1/4 cup of liquid in. So here I've only added about half the chocolate so far. I've been stirring this for about 4 minutes. As you can see, it's still got a lot of big chunks in it. So I'm kind of worried about the consistency. These are supposed to be the smoothest truffles ever. And I'm afraid that by not chopping the pieces really finely, that it may take too long to melt. And I may even have to apply a little more heat, which can be a danger for causing your chocolate to seize up. So I'm a little worried about this. Now I've been stirring this for about 9 minutes on a burner that's just warm to the touch. And I'm mainly trying to make sure that the bottom doesn't get kind of cooked and chalky. You can see it's a very thick and almost sticky mixture. There's still a lot of melting left, so I'm going to keep on stirring until it's just smooth enough that I can't really see many chunks. I have been stirring for 25 minutes and it's reached an interesting consistency. It's almost like a dough. And it's not on heat right now. The pan isn't hot at all. It's very airy and fluffy, and it has a pretty sheen to it. You can see when I squish it how there's a lot of air in there. There are just a few little chunks left, so I'm trying to squish those and mix them in. Also, you can see that it's very, it doesn't stick to the pan at all. It's very oily. You can actually see some of the oil in the pan there. And I've never made truffles before, so I'm a little worried that this might not be good, that I might have broken an emulsion in there. but we'll see how it looks after it's all mixed up and cooled. So I've stirred this for a total of 30 minutes, and I think this is about as good as it's going to get. It's almost like a dough. It's very fluffy, and you can see that it stays stuck to itself really well. It doesn't really stick to the pan or break apart. There's still a lot of this oil in the pan, and I'm thinking that because this is the one that I didn't add the alcohol to, that the shortage of liquid kept the emulsion from being stable. So we'll see how this turns out. I'm going to put it in the fridge and let it set, and I'll let you know how long it's in there. The chocolate has been in the fridge for 16 minutes. You can see it's soft, but partially firm. It still has, you can see these kind of oily spots, which have thickened up a little bit. So as I roll these into a ball, I'm going to try to remix that a little better. But it looks very rich and smooth. The truffles are very soft and squishy and oily, like they don't really stick to my fingers. I've been rolling some of them in this Dutch processed cocoa powder, which is a little bit more mild than just straight dark cocoa powder. You can kind of see here on the edges some of the chocolate is very firm, and this is more airy and squishy. I'm a little worried that these won't firm up like a truffle is supposed to. But I guess they'll taste good anyway. We'll see. So here's the first batch of truffles. I rolled this many in the cocoa powder, and these are plain. You can see these ones are very oily, and it took quite a bit of cocoa powder to soak up the oil. These ones are firming up a lot better than I expected. That doesn't really squish too much, whereas these ones that I rolled last are still quite soft. I wanted to put them in the fridge to help them firm up, but I think I'm just going to leave them out and see how they do. And so now I'm going to get to the batch that I cook according to the recipe with the Grand Marnier. I'm starting another batch that will have the Grand Marnier in it, and I'm only making a half batch this time, so this has 2.5 egg yolks and an 1/8 cup of cream. And once this thickens a little, I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of butter, then the Grand Marnier and chocolate, which I have chopped more finely this time. It's almost powdered. This has been on low heat for about 8 minutes, and it's resisting flow a little more and has the skin on the top like the last one. I don't know if you can see that. So I'm going to go ahead and take this off and add the butter. So here's with the butter added. It's kind of foamy. So now I'm going to add the liqueur and the chocolate and stir those together. This should go much faster than last time. Ooh! After about 15 minutes of mixing, this is much more smooth than the last in about half the time. It still has a little bit of that oil coming off. And I'm not sure if that's from the physical manipulation or a chemical thing like the emulsion breaking. But since this one isn't quite to that point, I'm going to stop before it gets there and put it in the fridge. These are the ones from the first batch I've made, and they've hardened really nicely, so that's encouraging. After the second batch comes out, I will do a side-by-side comparison. The second batch of truffles has been in the fridge for 16 minutes, as was the first batch, and it's firm, and this batch looks really good. It looks very creamy, and I think the firmness is better, because in the last batch it was just kind of oily and airy, but this is a dense, creamy truffle. So I'm going to roll these into balls. And then I have a couple of toppings here. Here I have toasted and ground up almonds, toasted pecans, and very, very toasty coconut that I ground up just a little bit. So we'll see what those look like. This truffle mix is very beautifully smooth and dense. But if you can tell, it's also a lot more sticky than the last one. It's sticking to my fingers and making the truffle look kind of jagged. So hopefully this should make it a little easier to shape and handle. It looks really pretty. Kind of like a Ferrero Rocher. So I've bitten into the two truffles. Both are very good. You can see they're so creamy that I almost can't hold on to them. So this is the one without the liqueur, and it's a little drier. The chocolate is the most apparent taste. This one with the liqueur, it's much more smooth, and it almost feels cool on your tongue because of how smooth it is. And then after the kind of creamy fattiness, you feel the alcohol kind of tingle on your tongue. I think then comes a sort of bitter note, and you can also get a nuttiness at the end, I think. It helps to roll them in cocoa powder. You see these look much more dry, but even just touching them with your finger makes them very melty. So, I mean, the nuts are helpful for eating them at least. But both are very good.